Hear this, O priests. Take heed, O house of Israel. Give ear, O house of the king. For yours is the judgment, because you have been a snare to Mizpah and a net spread on Tabor. The revolters are deeply involved in slaughter, though I rebuke them all. I know Ephraim, and Israel is not hidden from me. For now, O Ephraim, you commit harlotry. Israel is defiled. What do you got?
Just my verse 2 is different, that's all.
Oh. They do not direct their deeds toward turning to their God, for the spirit of harlotry is in their midst, and they do not know the Lord. The pride of Israel testifies to his face. Therefore Israel and Ephraim stumble in their iniquity. Judah also stumbles with them. I want to burrow that out more. They do not direct their deeds toward turning to their God, for the spirit of harlotry is in their midst, and they do not know the Lord. So it's not saying that it's in them, but in their midst.
Mine's have their deeds do not permit them to return to their
Okay.
God.
They will not frame their doings to turn unto their God. So here we have in verses 4 and 5, we have pride testifying against their face, and the inability and an inability to turn unto their God.
Mm-hmm. And Judah also stumbles with them. So he's not even... So again, like Kimberly keeps pointing out, when it says Israel, it's not like the Davidic Israel of all the tribes, but pointing out, as Ezekiel would later say, Judah watched these things happen, and then he continued in the sin, and all the more.
Would you read your verse 2?
Yeah.
Or Kimberly?
Okay. Verse 2, and they have made deep the pit of Shittim, but I will chastise all of them. But it also puts a note at pit of Shittim, and it's like, Hebrew's uncertain. Thank you. That was a very good note. So.
Very insightful there.
Yes.
So, okay, he's saying once again the charge of you have not known me, and he says to Ephraim in Israel, or to Ephraim in 3, I know Ephraim.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I think this is not only that he just sees everything, but he is saying, I have known you in an intimate way.
Yeah.
Like, I have, like, because in Amos, he says something, so he says, Israel, you alone have I known, therefore I will punish you. There is a,
it's almost that...
there is a responsibility and an accountability for having been offered relationship with the Lord.
I almost feel like it's a marriage kind of knowledge.
Yes.
Not simply, I know you because I know your name and I know about you and where you live, like friends might. No. This is a marriage kind of knowledge. I know you through and through because we've become one. Therefore, I... ... I like that verse in Amos.
I know you and you have not known me because of the spirit of whoredoms. So there's...
Yeah. And it's interesting because you do have Hosea, up to this point, has continuously used this harlotry language, and with Gomer and with Israel both, that they are committing harlotry, committing adultery. And you've even got it in verse 3. For now, O Ephraim, you commit harlotry. Israel is defiled. But you have in verse 4, it's not that they're committing adultery, but the spirit of harlotry is in their midst. And it's interesting that he's still differentiating as if this is my people, but they are not identified with that. There's something apart from them that is influencing and bringing this through them.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So it's this lack of the spirit of harlotry in them, or that's working in their midst, is defiling
Yeah.
their ability. You worship me with your lips, but your hearts are far from me.
Yeah. I guess I'm caught by the discussion we were just having with not being one with the accuser of the brethren and pointing the finger and etc. etc. And here we have in chapter 5 the spirit of harlotry. It again seems to be speaking to me of that same thing, that it's not that God is identifying them as these things, but he's saying you're doing these things because there's a spirit in your midst. There's something that is drawing you. There's a veil, so to speak, that has caused for you to turn towards harlotry instead of turning towards me. I guess the discussion just keeps on compounding here.
And it's so speaking of that spirit of, it's a spirit of whoredoms in the midst, just to remind us of what else he already said about this. In chapter 4, he says, whoredom and wine and new wine take away the heart. My people ask counsel at their stocks. So whose stocks? The whoredom? The spirit? They're asking, I don't know. And their staff declares unto them, for the spirit of whoredoms has caused them to err. So he's putting it's the spirit of whoredoms having caused them to err, and they have gone a whoring from under their God.
Yeah. I didn't even notice it last night when we were going through that.
The God of this world has blinded them that are perishing.
And it's not as if all of them have been blinded, because there's obviously Hosea who's seeing it, being in their midst, but what a statement.
And the pride of Israel does testify to his face, and therefore shall Israel and Ephraim fall in their iniquity. Judah also shall fall with them. Pride goes before the fall, right?
Yeah. I think it's a haughty spirit before the fall and pride before destruction, but yeah.
Oh, let's repeat it twice.
Is it? Okay.
So knowing that this is the root cause, what is the remedy?
I wonder if we keep reading if it'll give the answer to that.
Certainly there's the hope, as the prophets often do right that way. You have to look at the depth of what's wrong before you can have the remedy.
Yeah. With their flocks and herds they go to seek the Lord, but they will not find him. He has withdrawn himself from them. They have dealt treacherously with the Lord, for they have begotten pagan children. Now a new moon shall devour them and their heritage. Blow the ram's horn in Gibeah, the trumpet in Ramah. Cry aloud at Bethaven. Look behind you, O Benjamin. Ephraim shall be desolate in the day of rebuke. Among the tribes of Israel I make known what is sure. Is this part of the remedy, or is this something else?
No, it's not the remedy yet, no.
Okay.
So one was the condition of death. And here it looks like this. Here comes the judgment or the cross, the destruction of that.
Yeah, the consequences. The princes of Judah are like those who remove a landmark. And I think of Deuteronomy. Is it Deuteronomy? Where it says, don't move the ancient boundaries?
Yes.
But
also what Judges, Joshua, everybody gets in on it. This is one of the abominable things to the Lord.
Yeah.
Say that again? Can you say that one more time? Sorry.
This is one of the abominable things to the Lord, that you would remove landmarkers and boundaries and monuments. And it seems like most of the 5 books of Moses speak of this and how it's just so offensive.
Of course, I think in the book of Deuteronomy, the idea is you don't move the ancient boundary stones, meaning you don't move your fence line 30 feet into your neighbor's yard to say you have a bigger property than you do. But certainly there's a spiritual application in that. That the princes of Judah are like those who move a landmark. Airplane.
Airplane using the street, I guess.
It's almost like the Lord has set a standard and said, this is the way in which I say that you as my people should be living and holding to me. But you have been unwilling, and you have not allowed your deeds to allow you to turn towards me. And because of that, I will pour out my wrath on them like water.
Where are we at?
That's the rest of verse 10.
Okay.
So, I don't know why this verse just popped into my head. I'm not going to look it up. But in jealousy is stronger than
The grave.
the grave,
Mhm.
and love is stronger than many waters.
Mm-hmm. Many waters cannot quench this love. Yeah.
Ready?
Yep.
Ephraim is oppressed, crushed in judgment, because he was determined to go after vanity. Therefore, I am like a moth to Ephraim, and like dry rot to the house of Judah. Didn't we just read Paul in 2 Corinthians? Was it 2 Corinthians that you're the fragrance of Christ?
It's 2 Corinthians 2.
Oh, maybe we didn't read that. Maybe I read
No.
that from Lars today. He was referencing here like the fragrance of Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to those who are perishing, the fragrance of death, or it could be like dry rot in in their house, in the house of Judah. When Ephraim saw his sickness and Judah his wound, then Ephraim went to Assyria and sent to the great king, but he is not able to cure you or heal your wound.
Mm. And indeed, he'll heal your wounds lightly.
If that.
If that, yeah. What is that in Jeremiah 30 where it says, you have an incurable wound?
Yeah, I think maybe Lamentations also speaks about this a little too. It does come up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just to keep tying in the accuser of the brethren thing.
Mm-hmm.
So he says in here that Ephraim is oppressed and broken or crushed in judgment because he was running after these things. And he's going to make his wound.
Excuse me.
And he saw sickness in his wound, yet could not heal you nor heal your wound. It says in Proverbs where it's right before it talks about the 6 things does the Lord hate, even yea the 7th. Right before that it says, forwardness is in his heart, and he devises mischief continually, and he sows discord. Therefore shall calamity come suddenly. Suddenly shall he be broken without remedy.
You know, it's interesting to consider, again, Paul is one of those people who ties themes together in a way that you need to be willing and open to see the connection of the themes. You have in verse 11 here, though, Ephraim is oppressed and broken in judgment because he willingly walked by human precept, is the way mine words it. And in that idea of law, human precept, the flesh, sin nature, I mean, however you want to look at it with the words of Paul, consistently, even though not every time, consistently, it is something that he ties to the principalities and powers and the things, the elementary things of this world.
The law of performance.
Right, and so to see that when they're willing to walk by human precept, it's still walking according to the wisdom of the principalities and powers that they've inherited from the spirit of adultery. That it's not as if they came up with this because they're so ingenious, but that the tricks of the devil are always the same.
And if there is no cure, he's...
Well, at least not when you go to the king of Syria.
Right, right. And what does Assyria represent but the very kingdom of darkness? It's like going to Satan for your healing.
Or making a covenant with death and hell.
Right.
Interesting. Good catch. Good catch.
And notice that it's not the king of Assyria that's seeing the sickness and wound. It's Ephraim sees his own sickness. Judah sees his own wound. You know? But instead of turning to the Lord to find healing, they turn to their other lovers. Because they do not know that I was the one who gave them their grain and their wine and their oil and their silver and their gold. And would not I also give them healing, that they might be full? Not just well, but full, made whole.
Yeah.
I think that's what Jesus is saying in Revelation 3 to Laodicea even, isn't it? Buy from me clothing for your nakedness and eye salve for your blindness.
Right.
And
as much as he may be upset, he does have great compassion on them and is calling after them even to this very last hour, you know? But the choice is still left open, and certainly that's something that's not merely in the Bible, certainly is something we do face now as well.
Can I keep reading?
If you're going to read, it's going to be like the big ramp. It's going to be here probably till 6:3.
Okay.
Ready?
For I will be like a lion to Ephraim, and like a young lion to the house of Judah. I, even I, will tear them and go away. I will take them away, and no one shall rescue. I will return again to my place till they acknowledge their offense. Then they will seek my face. In their affliction they will earnestly seek me. And we read in Deuteronomy 4 that very idea. When you're driven to the nations, when you're driven, and from there if you will seek me, with your whole heart, I will hear. Interesting. What's the remedy?
And in their distress they will seek me, saying, Come, let us return to the Lord, for he has torn, that he may heal us. He has stricken, and he will bind us up. After 2 days he will revive us, and on the third day he will raise us up, that we may live before him. Let us press on to know the Lord. His going forth is sure as the dawn. He will come to us as the showers, as the spring rains that water the earth.
Is that what yours says? Mine says he will come to us like he will come to us like the rain, like the latter and former rain to the earth.
Those are so beautiful when he says his going forth is prepared as a morning, and in Jeremiah he says, as long as you see the sun and the moon and the stars, I'm not done with you. So as sure as we know that the sun is, as sure as we can be confident the sun is going to rise every morning, that's how confident we know that he is coming. and come, let us return unto the Lord. Jesus beckoning like, oh, how I would have gathered them, and come unto me, all you who are
Weary
heavy
and
laden.
heavy
He is
laden.
always just, his cry from his heart is come.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we see there in chapter 6, verse 3, that this is the opposite of what's been repeated, that they don't have knowledge, that they err, and so they don't know, even think about knowledge.
Yeah.
The knowledge of the Lord, knowledge of God. But in 6:3 we see, let us know, let us press on to know the Lord.
Yeah. Pursue the knowledge of the Lord. Yeah.
Right? So they're willing to strive for it. They're
Yeah.
willing to endure
To strive
and
to enter that
persevere.
rest.
Yes, in a sense, strive to enter the rest. They're willing to persevere.
Yeah.
Those muscles, essentially, that haven't been used in a long time, they're willing to take that, like, groaning and screaming of working those old muscles back into shape so that they can know the Lord, because that's the most dependable thing that they have at this point of being already torn by God.
And it's in Deuteronomy, I'm not sure if it's in 32 or 20, or it might be Leviticus 26, something. He makes it very clear that he desires for them to know that he was the source of this. And in verse 1, they are saying, yes, he has torn us, and he has smitten us. So they are confessing, like in verse 15, he says, I will wait until they acknowledge their offense. So they're realizing that, one, they're taking ownership that they have offended, and they're also acknowledging that the Lord is the source of their distress, not just the people who are being used as the rod of his chastisement.
Right.
Which is something in past we have not seen come. That confession is.
And just like we see in Revelation, the people of the earth just continue to turn their hearts hard and cold. But here we see the people of God saying, okay, if this is what's happening, we believe and accept that it's from the Lord. And since it is from the Lord, let us throw ourselves upon his mercy. Just like David saying, who knows, maybe the Lord will have mercy with his child, his baby that was dying. And later when he makes the mistake of taking the census or the counting, and then he says, I choose the Lord because who knows, he may have mercy, you know? And so they're saying, okay, if these are things that are happening, let us see, maybe the Lord will have mercy.
And that there's at least enough knowledge of the Lord to know his heart that even though these things have befallen us, we know that his character is such that that's not his final word, and that this was done for our good. He chastens every son that he scourges every son that he receives.
So, what is it that has happened that has caused the heart to go from verse 4, chapter 5:4, where they do not direct their deeds toward turning to their God, and purposefully will not turn to him,
And are seeking the world to heal their issues.
right? So what's happened that has caused it that their hearts have now changed from refusing to turn to the Lord to seek for help, and now they're saying, come, let us return to the Lord?
Is it possible that we have a hint in 5:14 at the very end saying, I will carry off and none shall rescue? And though this is more of a violent language, could we not go back in Hosea to chapter 2, verse 14? Interesting, they're both 14. Therefore, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. And of course, it continues to go on. And again, we talked about the door of hope in 2:15. But even though that's a more tender language, and this here in chapter 5 is a more violent language, I wonder if it's not
The same event, essentially.
Well, because he says,
Yeah.
I will, that next verse, 15,
I will
I will give
return
her
to
her
them.
vineyards and thence the valley of trouble. So,
Yeah, right. In chapter 2 it is, and then in chapter 5 is 15. I will return again to my place until they acknowledge their guilt and they seek my face. That sounds like a valley of trouble.
Yeah.
And in their distress, they seek, and in their distress, they seek me, saying, like the Lord has total confidence, even though they've been ruled by a spirit of harlotry, even though they went to the king of Syria, the Lord has total confidence. I know exactly how to bring them back.
Yeah, he says, so here's a people in Isaiah 26 saying, yea, in the way of judgments, O Lord, we have waited for thee, and the desire of our souls to their name. So this is a people who understand they're in that, and he says in verse 9, with my soul have I desired thee in the night, yea, with my spirit within me I will seek thee early, which is what they say in verse 15, they will seek me early. For when your judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness.
And so could it be that when he tears them like a lion, it's not that he's actually hurting the core of who they are, but he's actually tearing that spirit of harlotry off of them that they've left on there so long it feels like their own skin, but he's tearing it off. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it says, let favor be showed to the wicked, yet will he not learn righteousness. In the land of uprightness will he deal unjustly, and will not behold the majesty of the Lord. So he's saying they will never know me or see me if I can let them continue in this condition. And the goal of all of this is that they may behold the majesty of the Lord. And then the beholding of him is the transformation. Lord, in trouble have they visited thee, they poured out a prayer when your chastisement was upon them. And then they go into the travail. But
I'm as I'm listening, I'm thinking there's a question that I've heard before, and I'm not sure that I've heard anybody ask or give a really profound answer to it. If Israel, whether you take that as all of Israel and Judah or just northern Israel, however you want to take that, if Israel has had many distresses in their past, exiled to Babylon, exiled to Assyria, the Roman destruction of Jerusalem, the Inquisitions and the Crusades, and all of the church history that is stained with blood, if they've had much distress through their history, what is it about this distress that makes it so much significantly different that the result is now, and I'm wondering if maybe it will be a time like no other of Jeremiah 30.
in Daniel 12.
Right. I'm wondering if the time like no other is not so much a profound statement of how severe it's going to be, but that this time is going to be different than their previous exiles and their previous times where they...
So what you're trying to say, a time like no other, is not just the severity of God, it's the goodness and severity of God.
Well, yes, but it's that I will allure her, and because he's alluring, she's recognizing him. For the first time in her judgments, she's recognizing him. And for the first time, that recognition then causes her to acknowledge their offense and seek his face. That this has not happened before. When they're carried away to somewhere else, they haven't seen it. Even the Jews now that are scattered throughout the world, do they see it as judgment, or do they see it as, well, we're just New York Jews or Chicago Jews or whatever? What is so different about this time? What is it that the Lord is inserting here that this is different than those first exiles and even the one we're seeing today? Do you get what I'm asking?
Mm-hmm. Well, and is it because this time until that that you would not be ignorant that Israel has been hardened in heart until the fullness of the Gentiles is the different reality is that this time, well, but there were those in Nazi Germany. There was the Corrie ten Boons. There was the Boff.
Is it Berlinski brothers? Is that their names for Defiance?
Bonhoeffer.
There's Bonhoeffer, yeah.
And so, is there is there the corporate Esther that is for such a time as this, that is interceding against powers and principalities, so that the veil is there a corporate cry from a full maturity, a church in fullness that is allowing for Israel to react differently to the conditions?
You know, you asking that makes me think of in Revelation 12 that the accuser of the brethren is cast down. And that in itself is a huge difference.
Enough to make heaven rejoice, I'm
Right.
just saying.
But to consider that Daniel 12:1 says, "Then Michael, the prince of your people, shall stand up, and there shall be distress in those days unlike any other." And you have in Revelation 12, Michael fights against the devil and his angels, and there was no place found for them, and the devil and his angels are cast down to the earth, the accuser of the brethren, who stands day and night to accuse them.
So, but is
there possibly a something that's happening there, that with the man-child going up, Satan cast down, and so there's an overcoming of the saints. There's a fullness.
There's Daniel praying in chapter 9.
Yeah.
Daniel's priestly identification and prayer, in which he was not aligning with the accuser of the brethren.
Yeah.
That triggered a war in heaven.
Yeah.
That Michael had resistance in heaven. So is there an overcoming? Yeah, to what you're saying. So is that correlation to what's going on in earth?
Right.
Affecting that? Versus how we've heard it before, that the accuser of the brethren gets cast down and suddenly the church is where it's at. Versus the church coming to fullness in order for that to be.
Well, you do have the angels speaking, I think both to John and Zechariah, saying, "I am just a servant as you are."
Mm-hmm.
You know, so when we fight spiritual battles, yeah, sometimes the angels are fighting in spiritual places. But even the prayer of Daniel, being a righteous man, identifying with the unrighteous, not working for the accuser of the brethren.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Was starting a spiritual battle that the angels
Yes.
And
continued.
Yes.
So we do work together with them, just as Art Katz talks about that great cloud of witnesses, and how it's not that they are merely buried in the grave or floating on a cloud, but that there is they are fighting in spiritual places now, in heavenly places.
we had
In a
talked
restful way, not in a striving way, but still.
We had talked about Ephesians 1 and the inheritance that's guaranteed by the down payment of the Holy Spirit until the redemption of the purchased possession. And so Ephesians 1 into 2, we're part of the Commonwealth of Israel, and then this is the mystery, and that we should be part of the fellowship of the mystery, that we shall inherit and be heirs with them. And he goes straight from that idea into he has
the manifold
wisdom of God, yeah,
being
demonstrated,
demonstrated through the church unto the powers and principalities.
Right.
So then you also, at that same time, it's so the same time where you're having all of this happening, we're looking at Daniel and Revelation, we could also bring in Zechariah, because at the beginning of that book, in which it does talk about the restoration, is that you have Joshua the high priest, and you have the confrontation between the Lord and the accuser of the brethren.
Yeah.
And the Lord says, "I rebuke you." Like there is. So is all of that
I can't get down, buddy.
being? Is that all being played out through mature church?
Right, and I guess that's what I'm asking.
Understanding our own
Is it-
priesthood, because that's
Is it possible that what's happening in Ephesians, what Paul is so grasping after, is that because we are in union with the Commonwealth of Israel, that we're not altogether something separate, but we've been grafted in, to use the Romans language, that we who were strangers are no longer strangers and foreigners, but we're now a part of the Commonwealth of Israel. And if we grasp that and really, really believe that, and say, no, we're not two bodies, we've been made one body under the same head, that same language is what we were seeing in Hosea 2, that they will be gathered together and appoint for themselves one head. When we grasp that and see the eschaton and see the fullness of it, and we are willing to sell all and be expended on behalf of that coming to pass, and travail for that and languish for that, is it possible that that creates a lifestyle that sees and reacts a certain way, so that we would be the demonstration as a corporate people to the principalities and powers, and by our life and by our prayers and by all other things, there is now that war in heaven that's enacting, that culminates in a certain time, a set time even, that the accuser of the brethren is cast down. It's a big statement, I know, but is that...
And all
I
of that
can add
allowed...
to the big
and
statement a little.
Go ahead, please do.
So we're talking about, like, is this what it looks like as a church coming into fullness? But I don't mind to bring it down a notch and say not necessarily even the whole church, but the remnant, the righteous yeast working through the whole dough brings it. That it, like, has it waited so long just for a remnant people? Like, even a Gentile people to say, well, we're just as good or bad, whichever way you look at it, as the northern kingdom of Israel. As a Gentile people, we are. And if we're just the same as the northern kingdom of Israel, then, you know, let us be that remnant who say, let us realign with Judah, not in their Judaism, but in their Hebraicness, in the place that the Lord has put his name. You know what I mean? Like, not Hebrew roots, but like true, authentic heart and soul crying out, like, we have sinned, we have killed the prophets, you know? Yeah. And just that righteous remnant could be enough to kick the accuser of the brethren out of the heavenly places because there's no more room for him.
Right, because it's the fullness.
Because we're choosing one head, even as a people who are not a people.
And I guess this gets back at even the cross of Jesus, and people see this as like a one-time event in history, and I'm saying no, it's not a one-time event in history, it's an eternal event. Therefore, all of history, past, present, future, is affected by that one and hangs upon that one event. So too with the second coming, with the casting down of Satan, with the coming of Jesus, the establishment of the kingdom. That's an eternal event that, yes, we have not yet come to a point of seeing it and beholding it, but there is a reality of it in our midst now.
And as that reality becomes the fullness of it being unfolded in us, so that it says there's a mystery of iniquity and a mystery
of godliness. Yeah.
Right. And so as the other seed is coming to its fullness and the darkness and all that's going on, that the fullness of the Gentiles is them walking in the priesthood to which Israel is called to, and that's
because we are Israel and not in a replacement way, but as a remnant.
But and so as that
the 7,000 have not bowed the knee,
and that's the
silent remnant. Nice, go ahead.
But Romans 11, that the first dough, the first handful isn't the whole lump holy. Right. So if in Ephesians, the very beginning, he says you are the first to believe. So as we're not a different lump of dough. We're just the first handful, the barley.
The first fruit.
That is, you are a first fruits of his creatures, says James. So as that priesthood is functioning, it allows Israel's reaction, our brethren's reaction in the midst of judgment, for them to turn, because the powers and principalities.
You mentioned the.
I'll take a break.
You mentioned the.
You
mentioned the mystery of godliness, and the mystery of godliness is described as the incarnation of Jesus. And I can't help but wonder: is it putting too much on that to say the incarnation is not just of Jesus but of his body, that the whole corporate Son shall also be...
The head has come out, as she was pointing out very well the other day, the head, whenever there's a baby born,
the head comes out first.
The head comes out, but you need a body coming out behind it for it to be able to...
And so I guess what I'm wanting to ask is it possible the I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness is a corporate, incarnate body that is now able to stand before the Lord as that corporate son. It's not just the seed being Jesus, but the whole seed. And it's still a first fruits in the sense of Revelation 12 there.
And
But is there something happening there? Am I hitting on something that the seed of the woman is a corporate son?
And it's and because it's the understanding of what the cross accomplished. He didn't do something for us. He brought us into such union with him that when the body, the community of Messiah was being persecuted, he was able to say to Paul, why are you persecuting me? Because to touch them was to touch him, because they've been brought into oneness. And Paul's first interaction with the gospel was one of oneness, one of Jesus saying, to touch them is to touch me because we are one.
So I guess what I'm getting at then, casting down of the accuser of the brethren, and then you go right into the persecution of the woman. That in Revelation 12:13 and onward, it talks about how she flees into the wilderness, and the dragon spews out of his mouth after her. And you have it picks up in Revelation 13 as out of the sea came this beast. And I'm wondering, is it possible that in the manifestation of the mystery of godliness through a corporate people, there is then the casting down and the bringing up of the mystery of iniquity?
And so he has a corporate
that
body
gets into
in
this
the
idea,
earth as well.
Right.
And doesn't
that gets
Jesus
the idea
say,
of restrainer, and I don't know that I want to get into that branch, but that's really interesting the way it all.
Jesus say something one time? There's only 2 men in the earth. I mean, you're either
I don't know
for.
that one.
He says.
There's a chance.
But basically, yes, you have the corporate body of Messiah, and you have a corporate body of anti-Messiah.
Right.
And they're both coming to their fullness.
And certainly you have the book of Revelation in that split there, that dichotomy, if you will, that there are those who inhabit the earth and dwell on the earth, and they follow after the beast, and then there are those who are in heaven. You have those who are sealed by God, and those who take up the mark of the beast. You know, there is that split there, that you have the lamb and then the dragon, or the lamb and then the anti-lamb, so to speak. The two seeds. And with the corporate expression of the one, the corporate expression of the other. And of course, we see the corporate expression through the whole of the Old Testament, but in the end times it aggregates to a culmination. You know? I don't know that I've seen it in that kind of depth and richness before. And leave it to the question, asking a better question. What is it that makes this time different than the other times? The Lord will have a corporate expression in the earth, unlike previous times. That corporate demonstration and expression
of priestliness, because we've been called as. How often do we hear the calling of a priest discussed? And that's what we're called to be. I mean, it's in Christendom, like.
Other than cats, I can't tell you I've ever heard anybody talk about it.